there are some new European laws coming into effect on the 28th of June, so we're already past that, for publishing books in the EU. So if you publish books in the EU, you might want to sit down and listen to this video. I'm gonna go get my fan. Yep, cool. What is going on with this? I feel like we're wonky, but that's what we're going with. I have some updates for the bookish publishing world that I've only just come across, so yay me, because the deadline for doing these changes was like the 28th of June. So I have done some research that you don't have to, but I will preface this by saying, of course you need to do your own research to make sure that you're happy with your books and where you're publishing them. Now, I will say there are a couple of websites that I have got a lot of my information from that were really helpful. One was like the ALI website, so the Alliance of Indie Authors, and then another one was actually Atticus. And this is how I was made aware of these changes, because I format with Atticus and I'm signed up with them, so I got their newsletter and there was this information there. So this is regarding the European Accessibility Act, so the EAA, and this is a law that is basically coming into play, well, it came into play on the 28th of June to allow those that have visual impairments and a wide range of disabilities to be able to access the same things. So what does this mean for authors? So for authors, this obviously is about our books, not print books, but ebooks. And it doesn't matter where you sell from, but if you sell in Europe, then you need to be aware of these changes and you may need to make some adjustments to your backlist. Now, before anyone starts panicking, there are a couple of exemptions. And secondly, that there is a grace period of about 5 years up until the 28th of June 2030 for backlists to be updated. So there is an exception to this new law. So titles published by micro enterprises are exempt. So micro enterprises are classified as those that have fewer than 10 employees and also have a turnover of less than 2 million. So this actually encompasses most indie authors. However, something that the ALI website did make me aware of is that we may still want to make sure these changes are updated on our end, because there are some hefty fines going on for anybody that does sell in the EU. So libraries, e-retailers and stores like that, they may actually start like delisting and not accepting titles that don't meet these requirements. So it probably is worth our while to make sure that we do meet these new EAA requirements. So one thing that I found interesting is that actually if we format with places like Vellum and Atticus, that these actually, a lot of the requirements are actually already part of the formatting. So it's things like being able to adjust text and make things clear, like a table of contents, and most places that I'm aware of you have to have a table of contents for an ebook and so on and so forth. So most EPUBs allow you to do this already because the text is movable and like your e-readers have that function to like read out and things like that. So a lot of that stuff isn't on us to do. Luckily, that sort of stuff is already in place when we use things like the EPUBs, and when you format through places like Atticus and Vellum, they're already compliant with those sort of things. The one thing that we do need to be aware of is alt text, which is alternative text. So alternative text or alt text is when you put into the code whatever you're coding, like on websites, or if you're uploading images to your ebook and stuff, there is an option for alt text which allows an e-reader to read something that we put in that category. So if you were a visually impaired reader, you would have the e-reader or whatever device you're using to read out the text for you. They obviously can't read the images, so that's what the alt text is for. The alt text is a concise description describing what that image is, so that people with visually impaired disabilities or are using the reading function, like the read aloud function, can understand what's going on in the text. But again, there are lots of different caveats to that, so let's go through it. So this information that I'm about to go through now, I actually had on the Atticus website, and they're also doing like a live Q&A. I actually think it's this week, so hopefully I'll get this video up in time for you to watch it, but I think they will be doing replays and stuff, which will be very, very good. Now on Atticus, because I format with Atticus, they have given us a walkthrough of how to add all the alt text through and what the differences are, like what images need alt text and what images don't. So let's go through that right now so we can have a look at alt text, because I think this is the biggest adjustment that we might need to do to be compliant with this new law. So alt text is a short, concise description to convey meaning or purpose to someone who cannot see that image, and it is very short. The maximum is 140 characters, which is Amazon's max, although it does say best practice is to keep it to around 125 characters. So you can already see this is not like a long description of something. This is giving a very short, concise description to somebody who cannot see the image, that they can carry on reading the text and understand what's happening. Now, we do not need to add alternative text to decorative images, so things like your scene breaks, or if you have like a chapter header, those are very decorative and are not needed. And also the alt text is not a caption, and it's not for adding extra details that aren't visible in the main text. If you're wanting to put details in your alt text, then that should be made available in the text, not in the alt text. And a good way to think this through is to think about the who, what, why, where, when. So you do want to add alt text if you need it to understand what's happening in the main text, so the main book, or if the image conveys new or essential information to understanding the whole book that you're reading, the whole text that you're reading. So good alt text should be just enough to convey its meaning or purpose for an image. It should provide clarity on what that image is, but without interpretation. The interpretation is done within the main body of text. It's to create a seamless experience for a reader, and you want to avoid things like quotation marks and excessive punctuation, because it can make it a bit more confusing for the reader to read out. And you also want to avoid saying like, this is an image of, or this is a photo of, because the e-reader will do that bit for you. You literally just put in the detail, and we'll go through some examples. But Atticus did give a really good like a formula to follow for alt text, so I'll just read that out for you. So it was what the image is plus the key detail or details or purpose in context. So let's have a look at some examples so we can sort of see what's going on. So for example, in my book, I have a map. So I would say the alt text for this would say map of Illyria showing kingdom boundaries, cities and mountains. Probably something like that. You may have an author photo, so you could describe what that author photo is. So this one's not a very good one, but I'll put in an image here, so I could say author signing at a book event, and that would explain what that picture is without having to add any of those extra details. But in the back of books, sometimes we put the next book cover in, so you could say book cover for next book in series, or book cover for book 3 in this series, and then assuming you would then underneath that have information about that book. So the text would be there that would be read aloud anyway. So you're just saying that this is a book cover for book 3 in the series, and then underneath it would then carry on reading the text that you already have. So for here, my alt text would just be author photo, probably. In my omnibus, in between, so for each of the books in my omnibus, I have a full page cover image, and so that's not quite purely decorative. It sort of demarks the next book, so I'd probably put alt text something along the lines of book cover for, and then whatever book it was. So it would be easy for them to understand what that image is. If I do actually have an image somewhere in this, my other series, that is a, what's it called, like a family tree map thing. So then I would just say what that is. So I would say family tree map of the Royal Shifter family That's probably all I would need to say. I do not need to describe the background, the colours, the styling, unless it's really necessary to the context. But for most of us, it wouldn't be. Now, I think there are some exceptions for picture books and comic books and things like that. I would definitely go and check up the rules and the laws surrounding that. The ALT website is probably a really good place to go and get some more information. I know they are also asking publishers like Amazon for some feedback on what's going to be updated and what's not going to be updated, like on their end. So that would be a good place to start. But for most of us writing fiction and even non-fiction, we would just need to be mindful of these changes, most of which should be done for us if you're formatting through places like Vellum and Atticus and using EPUBs, because the necessary adaptations are already there. But things like alt text is probably the biggest update that we need to be aware of. And I also think this may apply to websites, but I'm not quite sure. Haven't done my research into the website requirements just yet. I don't sell from my website anyway, so I don't need to worry about that side of things. I sell through third-party websites and Amazon. It's really hot, guys. Just gonna cool myself down. Might just sit here and pretend I'm some sort of like famous singer. Ah, da, 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 da. It's so hot, I just need to cool down. I don't know if you can actually hear that. So hopefully I've done a really quick overview of the new European Accessibility Act laws coming into play. In fact, they're already in play. Thankfully, Atticus did send that newsletter and I did become aware of it. So I wanted to do some quick research and share that information with you, because sometimes it's really hard to keep up to date with everything that goes on in the book world and how quickly things change. So just to summarize then, so people aren't panicking, it does not apply. There are exemptions, and those exemptions will cover most indie authors unless you employ people and unless you're making over 2 million euros, which if you are, well done. Having said that, the other like retailers and libraries could start delisting or not allowing you to put your books there if they're not compliant with the new laws. Thankfully, most books are compliant, and the ALT website does predict that most books will be compliant with what happens on like the other end, so the e-readers and the platforms that do the formatting. However, we as authors need to make sure that our table of contents is complete and accurate so that it's easy to navigate. And the biggest thing is that we need to have a look at our alt text and make sure we add it in. I don't know about you, but I was someone who always just used to ignore the alt text, mostly because I didn't understand what it was. So I will be going through my backlist and just updating. There aren't many books that will need me to be updated because, as I said, decorative images you don't need to use alt text for decorative images, and like use scene breaks and chapter headers, things like that. So it shouldn't take too long to update, but of course if you've got a massive backlist, even just going through one book, if you have, say, a map in there, if you've got an author photo, if you've got some book covers, like it still does take some time, but luckily we've got quite a few years. The main issue is if retailers and libraries start like denying our books because they're not compliant yet. So that's probably the worry, but there is a crossover period, as there always is. And there is a 5-year window to get all your backlist done. So hopefully it shouldn't cause anybody any issues. And I know that I'll just go through an update as well. Now, if you are part of the Atticus family, as we'll just call it now because I can't think of another word for it, then they are doing that live Q&A. I'll put the details down below so you can sign up for it. But I know it's pre-recorded, it's going live, and then it will be available afterwards. So when it is available afterwards, if it's a public link, I will link it in this video as well, so you can go and watch that Q&A. Also, I will put the websites in here that I used for my information. There are lots of websites out there that give a lot of information. I tried to narrow it down and focus on like the indie author side of things. That's why I went to like the ALT website, and then I used Atticus because they gave some quite good information on alt text and what it is and how to use it, etc. So hopefully you can do your own research as well and make sure you're happy that you are compliant with the European Accessibility Act. And again, it doesn't matter if you're not from Europe, it matters if you sell in Europe. So hope that's been informative, hope that's been helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.